Hey Dev, welcome back to Code in Heaven. I'm very happy to see you. Today we're going to continue working on our budget app and connect the front end with the back end that we created in the previous video. In this video, we're going to create a React project. We're going to set it up. We are going to create routing with TanStack, and we're going to use Material UI and Tailwind for our styling. I'm going to post the link to our source code in the description. And this is how our application will look like in the end. So let's not lose any time and get started. Our first step will be to start the React application. As you might have heard, the current Create React app is deprecated. Even we used it in our previous videos. It is not the way to go for the new projects. So this time we're going to use Vite, a build tool for the web. The command we're going to use is npm create vite at latest. We will ask you a few questions about what type of application you want. So we're going to select React, TanStack router, and no rollup. So also, if you already have npm, we're going to answer no and ask to install it. Also, Vite is going to ask us about router type. So we're going to use file-based routing and Tailwind for styling. Now, after everything is installed and installed very fast, we can clean up a little bit and remove unnecessary files. So our important files here are root CSS and index CSS. They're located in our routes folder, and we're going to remove everything inside div in our index CSS. Also, we're going to remove logos, images in public folder. After we're done, we're going to run npm run dev. This is what start our project. And if we will visit our localhost 3000, it's going to be blank. You can see it here. So if it's not blank in your version, just make sure index CSS is clean. Now that everything is nice and clean, we can start our work. Our app is going to have two pages, the home page and the budget page. This is why we need routes. So our users can navigate across the app. First of all, let's create our routes file. Make sure you are in source and enter this command. Touch router ts. So inside this file, we're going to create our router instance. Export const router equals create router. In our parentheses, we're going to type route tree, context, empty curly braces, default preload, intent. Also, we're going to import create router in router tree. So here, what happened here? We created the router instance and we use our route tree, auto-generated, that has all defined routes, right? Our context is supposed to be empty this time, but we can pass your data into our routes, like user data, for example, like user ID and whatever. So we don't really need that this time, so context will be empty. Right now, want to make sure that our index.ts has this line, export const route equals create file route. So basically we're saying this component will represent our home page, right? So the slash, it will be our root. If we will land to our localhost 3000, our component app will be our home page, right? So this file is going to be used in our auto-generated route tree. So if you don't have it in your file, make sure to add it. As I mentioned that our app needs two pages, we can go ahead and create a new file and add a new route to it. So I'm going to create a new directory, remember, because it's file-based routing. So we're going to type mkdir budget, going to move it there, cd budget, and create touch index tsx. So basically, when user will go to localhost 3000/budget, they are going to see this page here, index.tsx. And this is how our index.tsx and budget looks like. So we have our budget route and our return is hello budget. Now it's time for us to start building. And I think we are better start with our index.tsx or with our home component. So right now we're going to change the name from app to home. I'm going to name it home component, and it's going to return our div. As I said, since we're using Tailwind, we're not going to have any CSS. So I'm going to say div, and our class name is going to be flex. We're going to do justify around, item center, minimal height, background. Also, I want to update our font, so go to index.html. I'm going to paste font I took from Google, so it will be League Spartan. And also I'm going to update style CSS and add our font family League Spartan as well. Now we're going back to our index.tsx and continue adding our styles. Paddings will be 10. Inside we're going to do section, some of our margins and width. Then we're going to say our h1, our heading, and it's going to say budgetify. Okay, some class name like a font, text size, text color, margins. Our heading 3, and we're going to say we're helping individuals manage your funds and track expenses. No joining fees, no hassle. Again, text 3XL, text, color, font, medium. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to create a button that will navigate us to budget. So here we have a link that comes from React Router and TanStack. So we're going to say link to /budget. Again, we give it class name, and inside we place a button that will have text start now. And class name, we're going to add some margins, background, text, paddings, rounded, cursor pointer, hover, transition. All right, looks good. So our button is ready. Now let's create a new section. So inside our section, we are going to place image, source image.svg. I already added it in our public folder. Alt will be credit cards, and class name will be width 900 pixels. All right, looks nice. At this point, our localhost 3000 should look like this. So now we can start working on our main functionality. We're going to move to our budget/index.tsx file. So we need to display two lists, right? Expense and income. And we're going to have a separate component that's going to handle those lists. Also, we want to add a dashboard that will tell the user whether they overspending or not. Also, we want to include a way for the user to return to a home page. Let's rename our route component to a budget component. So function budget page, and going to update our route component budget page. We will start with our back home button. So I'm going to say div, class name P6MXAuto. I'm going to say link, right? So you remember we did use a link in our home page. So we're just going to link it to our /, so our home page. We give it class name flex gap to item center, text XL, cursor pointer. And I'm going to use one of material UI icons, keyboard backspace icon. By the way, you have to install it with npm install icons material. Now we're going to create span back home and then close our link. Now I'm going to do h1, class name text 3XL, font bold, text ML6, MT9, current cash flow. So now I'm going to create a section that will hold flex of our lists, expenses and income. So as I already said, section, class name flex, gap 10, left margin 5, bottom margin 10. Inside, we're going to have two divs. So first div will be for expenses. So div, h2 class name text to XL, font bold text, ML2, MY5. It will be for expenses. And here I'm going to add a comments component for expenses. Now we're going to create another div. I'm just going to copy and paste h2 from expenses and change our text in tag to income. And again, the comment will be here for component for income. And another div will be for dashboard, component for dashboard. And now we're done with this section. We're going to create a new one. That will be for button that adds a new entry to our income or expenses. So section class name flex justified between item center, and that will become a component for adding new entry. That should be good enough for us. Right now, I think it's time to add a little bit more functionality. So we're going to create API calls to our backend and get income and expense data. For that, I want to define types since we're working with the TypeScript. So we're going to define export type expense. It's going to have the same data that our backend has. So like ID, name, category, amount, and date. Same thing for the income. Now what we want to do, we want to add a new variables that will represent our list into our function budget page. So let's type const expenses, set expenses equals use state, type expense, array. And initial state will be empty array. The same thing for income. So basically we're just defining this data and we're going to pass it into our future component for expenses and income. I'm going to create a method that's called fetch budget. So when user will land to our budget page, this is what they will see. Our page will send requests to our backend and return that back our data for expenses and income. So let's type const fetch budget. is going to be a sync method, right? And our body will have const expenses await fetch. We're going to call our localhost 8080/expense and going to set our expenses to expense data. Again, this is after we already got it and transform into JSON. So now the same thing for income. Const income await fetch localhost 8080/income. Const income data await income.json set incomes income data. So this is our method that's going to run, right? Right now it's not running yet, we just define it. So now we're going to use a new hook named use effect, right? So this data is going to be loaded when our user landed on the page. So the first render is going to run fetch budget. So use effect, and now inside use effect, we're going to write fetch budget, and we're going to add empty square brackets as a second argument to our use effect. So it means it's only fires when our component rendered. Now it's time to create the actual list component for our expense and income lists. We're going to move into our source folder and create a new directory named components. This is where our dashboard, the button for creating a new entry, and other components will live. So inside this folder, I'm going to create a new file called budget lists tsx. In this file, we want to define the type of properties that will be passed from the parent component to our list component. So basically, what our properties will be, we will have list property that will hold actual values returned from our API, right? So it's either expense or income. We're going to have a type that will be a string that indicates whether the component should display expenses or income. And also we're going to have two methods as our props. It's update and delete. So this will be triggered when the user decides to update or delete an entry, right? And they will tell the parent component, hey, update the lists right now. Call the API to delete or update. Now let's define our component. We'll write const budget list. In parentheses, we're going to list our parameters: list, update entry, and delete entry, and type. And that will be type of budget list props that we just defined. Next, we need to decide how our list should behave. I want the list to have two modes: view mode and edit mode. To switch between these modes, we're going to use conditional rendering. If the user is in edit mode, we display one layout. If not, we display the default view layout. And as you might have guessed, the best way to manage this is with the use state hook. So we're going to create this. Const is edit mode, set is edit mode, and we're going to say use state false. So initial state will be false because when user will land on the page, they'll simply see the list entries. But if they press the edit button, we'll switch the component into edit mode. This is our end goal, basically. Now let's work on our layouts. We'll start with the return statement. Inside of it, we check if list length equals to 0. If it does, we want to display a message saying that the list has no records, whether it's income or expense. Remember, list is a property that passed from the parent to our budget list component. So if the list is not empty, we use a ternary operator to render the list. So we're going to take this list property from the parent and map over it. So for every element in the list, we create a div. And if we're in edit mode, we display a set of input fields. So the first one will be a text input for the item name with the default value equal to item.name. And we're going to pass it a method, a function on change, right? This is JavaScript. So if our user types something in this input, it's just going to change our item name to whatever user typed in. So it will be event target value. The same thing we're going to do with our item category for our input for the amount and input for our date. Also, I want to add a button that will save the updated data, call the parent's update entry method, and then set is edit mode back to false. There also will be a cancel button that simply exits edit mode without saving. Now let's create the view mode. Again, for every item we'll render a div containing span elements. So our span will be item name, item category, item amount, and item date. Now I'm going to add two icons. One is for editing, right? So button, edit node icon component, and on click it's going to set editing mode to true. And another one will be button for deletion, right? So that will be highlight of icon. And on click, it's just going to fire delete entry. And it's going to take item ID and type. I'm going to export our component so we can use it later. Now let's go ahead and update our budget index.tsx. We're going to add expense and income as parameters with their proper types, replacing the comments with our actual budget list components. So we're passing list parameter with expenses, right? We're also adding type. In our case, it will be expense. Now we're going to copy and paste it and add it to income. So it lists income, type income. And as you already know, we have update and delete entry. So we're going to keep them empty, copy, paste. All right, so right now we have to define our update entry. So let's just create update entry. Const update entry equals async. Our parameters will be item, either expense or income, and type string. So if our type equals expense, we're just going to send a call into localhost 8080 expense. Our method will be put, our header's content type application JSON, and body is actual item. Else, so obviously if it's not expense, it's probably income. So we're going to send our request to income localhost, method put, and body item. So very simple. Now let's define our delete entry. So const delete entry, again, async, accept our parameters rd, it's number, and type string. Again, if type expense, we're going to call expense, remove expense, and our parameter ID that we just got from our budget list, and method will be delete. And then we're going to set our expenses into expense filter x ID not equals ID. Same thing for our income. Remove income ID, method deletes and incomes, filter income ID not equals ID. Now go ahead, update our budget list, delete entry, and update entry for both income and expense. Perfect. Let's go ahead and check our local host 3000/budget. Okay, so we have no records, but I think something's wrong. Let me check the console. Okay, I see there is a course error, but we did fix it before. So the issue in our code, in our index.tsx, we should go back and fix our fetch budget. So you see localhost 8080/expenses, but actual route should be expense, no S on the end. Please fix that. And now let's see our localhost. Yep, awesome, it's all working. So we will deal with styles later, and right now let's create another component that will display data about overspending. It will be our dashboard component. So let's create a new file in our components folder and name it Spedning dashboard.tsx. So again, we're going to start with our props, right? So our type Spedning dashboard props is going to be expenses, array of expense, and income, array of income. So now we're going to say export default function Spedning dashboard, our parameters expenses and income of type Spedning dashboard props. And here I'm going to define three variables. Total expenses, we're going to take our props expenses, reduce it, and have our sum plus expenses amount. So basically we're just making a function that will calculate sum of all expenses, the same thing for total income. And now overspending, this will be our boolean that will compare total expenses with total income and return for true or false. So in our return we're going to say div, right? It will be our wrapper, and create another div. And now we're going to say div be total income, and we're going to put span with total income. The same thing, we're creating another paragraph with total expenses. And now we're going to create another div and place overspending variable inside, right? Again, it's conditional ternary operator. So if a user overspending, we're going to create P that said overspending time to cut expenses. And else, we're going to say within the budget, doing great. All right, now I want to add an image. We're going to add alt overspending, and going to add source. Source is going to be is total expenses more than total income? Then our source is going to be wallet SVG. Otherwise, it's going to be CoinStack. And these images are already added into our public folder, wallet, and CoinStack. So before we update our index.tsx, let's create the last component that will handle the logic for writing a new expense or income. Let's create a new file in the components folder and name it add new entry button tsx. So this component will be representing a button. When user will click on it, they will see a form, right, for income and expense. So they can like fill it out, submit it, and it will be added to our list. And it also will make an API call. We will define a type, add entry props equals, and it will accept only one prop of a method, refresh UI. Parameters will be item, it will be or either expense or income, and type will be string. Again, we have to define it. In our function, it will be const add new entry button, parameters refresh UI of add entry props. I'm going to create a useState hook that will control the state of our form for user input. So initially it's going to be set on false. So our display form and set display form use state false. Now I want to create another hook that will allow the user to switch between adding an income or an expense entry. We will use selected button and set selected button. And the initial value will be income. Now I'm going to create a return statement. So, and inside our parentheses, we're going to say section, and I'm going to say display form, exclamation point, and inside our parentheses, we're going to say button, add new entry, and on click, basically, we're just going to set form display, our previous value, opposite of our previous value. So whatever they click at, it will be opposite of previous one. So let's now create the actual form for adding a new entry. We'll start with a display form, and inside the parentheses, we'll create a new div, then a form. Inside the form, we'll add a h2 element with the text add new, and we're going to use selected button variable in our span, so it will be part of our title. So next we're going to wrap everything in another div and create closing button for closing our form. So when it's clicked, the button is going to set our form display to false. Now let's move on and create a array of buttons for selecting income or expense. So we're going to create a label named select type, then add a radio group from material UI. So we're going to give it a name, budget type going to be value, that will be our selected button variable, and we're going to add on change, and we're going to update selected button with selected value from event target value. Next, we'll create a div and add a form control label. For the income option, so value will be income, control will be radio, and label is going to be income. And we're going to repeat the same structure for the expense options, but value will be expense and label will be expense as well. So after we finish the radio group, let's create another div for our input fields. We'll start by creating a label named title and include the name of our expense or income, and then add an input for it. For the proper type text, it should be required, and name will be title. So we're going to use it in the future in our body. So next one will be the same for amount, right? So label change into amount, type will be a number, so a name will be amount 2. Same thing for category, changing it to text and name category. And the last one should be our date. So type will be date, name date. Now let's create a new button named submit. It's going to be type submit. So our form, when someone click on the form, it's going to trigger on submit event. So let's add on submit to our form, handle submit. And since we don't have it yet, let's just define it. It's going to be async function that receives the event and calls our event prevent default. So then we're going to create our body that's going to capture the values entered by users. So it's going to be name, amount, category, and date. So event target title, value, event target amount, value, and obviously already like target category and target date. So we're going to call API by creating an endpoint. It's going to be based on selected button. So we're going to capitalize our first letter. Because remember, in our backend we have add expense and At income, our I and E, they're capital, so we need to kind of tweak it a little bit. So to uppercase and selected button, we're going to slice it to 1, and this is a little bit our magic. So basically getting the capital E and I for our endpoint. So now we're going to create response, await, fetch. We're going to get our localhost 8080 base route. Now we're going to say selected button to lowercase, add our endpoint variable. So this setup allows us to send requests to both the income and expense APIs without writing separate calls for each one. We can reuse it basically. So method will be post for this, headers, application JSON for content type, and our body is going to be JSON stringify body that we just defined. So after that, we're going to say const data equals await response to JSON, right? And then we're going to set our form display to false, refresh UI, body, and endpoint. So we're calling our parent function to update the UI and display the latest list. So now let's add an export to our component so we can use it in the parent. To export default, add new entry button. So we are ready now to go back to our index.tsx and budget and add our components. So we're just going to say add new entry button component. And now we need to also pass our parameter, our property for refresh UI. As you already remember, we did not create this method yet in our parents. So just let's go ahead and do it now. Type refresh UI command and const refresh UI equals. So basically we're going to have two parameters. An item that's going to be a type of expense or income, and its type, obviously. So we're going to say, if the type is expense, then we're going to call set expenses, going to create a new array that uses the spread operator to include our existing expenses plus this new item. Else, we're just going to do the same thing for our income. So instead of set expenses, we're going to say set income. Again, new array that includes our existing income plus the new element. Now let's add a spending dashboard to our index, and we are going to replace our comment with this component, and we have to pass our expense and income lists as props. So now let's check how our localhost 3000 looks like. Our app is running. So let's see. Our current cash flow, expenses. We have total income, total expenses within budget, doing great. So basically this is our spending dashboard. This is our two lists, expenses and income. And here's this our button. So let's try to add something new. So I'm going to type expense, select expense, amount 300, category gas, expense, let's see, date 26, and title, let's say just like gas money, and let's click submit, and you see what happened in our expense. We actually got a new entry, so it's working. So let's remove it. Perfect, it works. And now if we try to add something, you see we have edit mode for every entry. So we actually have to fix that, because this is not what we want. We want when user click on the item, this is only one item that is going to be edited. So let's go back to our budget list. So we're going to create a new variable to hold our item ID, and the edit mode will be visible only for the selected item, but not for all of them. So we're going to say const editing ID, set editing ID, use state. It should be either number or null, right? So for example, if nothing is selected, our editing ID is null. So, and now we're just going to update our line 31 and say is edit mode, and our editing ID equals item.id. Yes, so we're just going to display edit mode only, and only in this case. Let me just add a comment. Now editing will be only for this selected item, not for all of them. But it's not everything we need to do. We actually have to select it, right? So we have to set them. So basically when user will click on our editing node, it's going to update our ID to this particular ID. So let's just go ahead and update our view mode. So you see this edit node icon, our button. We're going to say set editing ID item.id. Perfect. And now I'm going to also update our buttons inside our edit mode. For example, when user will save or cancel editing, right? They're both going to set our editing ID to null. So save button set editing ID to null and cancel. Awesome. Now let's go ahead, check our local host 3000 / budget and see, did it work or not? Okay, so our current cash flow. Let's try to click on gym membership. So yes, we have one edit mode per item. Perfect. Let's update electricity bill and change it to 180. Also, let's update the date. Let's put on 25th. Save. All right, it did work. Looks nice. So let's refresh it. And yes, it's still there. Our database returned per good results. If we're going to remove something, it's still going to stay there. Right now I'm going to update style and make everything looks pretty, so just watch me. We're going to start by updating the budget list first. Basically, I want to display each item in a column layout, and each item will have a light shadow for its background. In our edit mode, our input is just going to have only bottom border with gray color. And we're going to repeat this all for every input. So for our amount, for our category, and for our date. So they're all the same. Now, for our button, we're just going to have light green color for both of them, but the save will be a little bit more bright. So in our view mode styling, we will just adjust the font weight. So the title will be a semi-bold and the darker color, more darker color than the category. So outside of that, we also want to play around with our date and change the format to display only the day, month, and the year. So no time, and it's going to look more nice and clean. And then finally, two buttons for delete and update. We're just going to change it to yellow and red colors, and this is how it looks like now. Yes, very nice. So I want to update actually our buttons and a div because I want to keep them on the same line. So let's just add flex, item center, justify. Yep, that looks much better. Like it. So now let's go ahead and update our spending dashboard. So basically we're going to just add a nice layout for our items and change their color depending on whether spending is true or false. So it's either red or green. Our last component to update is add new entry button. So basically we're just going to style our form and add the button that opens this form. So I just want the form to appear on a blurred dark background. Outside of that, we also need to update and make our input looks nice. So I'm finishing my form, going to update H2 and my span to make it actually be on the same row. Yep, adding a new color to the button, updating labels and our divs. So every label will be the same in our form and every input will have the same styling. So I'm just going to copy and paste it everywhere for amount, title, update, and our submit button will have its own style as well that will be copied and pasted into our add new entry button. Finally, we're done with styles. This is our UI. Let's remove all income and try to get outside of the budget error. Let's add a new expense, call it car, 9,000, wow, and any date. So let's get rid of it. Yep, overspending, time to cut expenses. So we're basically done. So this was our budget app. Thank you so much for watching it. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos. Also, I have a blog with materials available ahead of time and articles that don't have videos yet. So definitely check it out. The link is in the description. Additionally, I started a Telegram channel, which is the best way to contact me and ask questions. Thank you again and happy coding.